me, but Miriam Perzyk, if I pronounce it correctly. Perczyk, yeah, Miriam Perzyk, which you described the basically the loss of a friend actually influencing a personal relationship that you might have wanted, but was sort of, let's say sort of, you couldn't even get yourself to a point where you could explain what you have lost or what happened.
Right. The person who was killed was not a friend of mine. He was somebody I knew, and he was sort of a persona. And I wasn't there when he was killed. He was serving at a different place when he was killed. I heard about it. What happened, and this is autobiographical, but I want to mark that Bensi is based on certain aspects of me, but very different from me. If I wanted to quantify, I'd say 35 to 40% me, but it's not autobiography. This other piece that I sent you, Miriam Perzyk, it's nonfiction. And yet the Ori Weisberg there is also a representation. It's not exactly me. It's a representation of me, even though I'm constructed. So the event that this is based on is this person I was with in basic training. We barely knew each other, but he was a really strong persona. Was killed in an accident, in a very tragic accident. And the week before, I very risibly blow it with this lovely Australian. We'd received a new group of soldiers on my base, so I had a new squad that I was commanding. And I hear this voice, and I turn around, and I see this guy who I know has been dead for a few years. Not a few years, it was like probably just a year. Within the last year, I'd heard that he died and how he died. And it's his younger brother, who was only a year younger and was almost an identical twin. So if you want to talk about haunting, what I was dealing with is realizing that every day of my life for the next 6 months, while this guy is in my squad, I'm going to have a ghost in my squad. He has the same voice of his brother, the same height, the same body build. Some of their facial features were a little bit different. But I found out from his friends that even his father would occasionally mix them up. They also had very similar names. They were like doppelgangers. So now he's a different person, but every time I look at him and every time I hear him, I'm thinking of this guy I know who's dead and who was killed in a terrible way and never will be older than 20 years old. And that's going to be every day. And I go home, I get out on a furlough that Shabbat, and there was a woman who I was very interested in, mostly because she was remarkably beautiful and had a lot of charisma. I didn't even know her really yet. We hung out a little bit, and she said something in front of me that embarrassed me. Whether it needed to embarrass me, who knows? And I sort of blew up at her. And I talked to her in a way that I've never spoken to any other woman. And I just threw this very crude thing at her. And I got up and I walked away. I never spoke to her again, even though we were in the same place for the next few months. Well, I was only there on weekends when I got out of the army, but she was there for a few months. Never apologized, never anything. I just decided she was A, B, or C when I really didn't know. I didn't know her. And I didn't connect these two events at all. And that's the way that these experiences overdetermine all sorts of things. You know, things did work out for me with other women. Shortly after she left, I started a relationship with an amazing woman that went on for 2 years. And yet I don't think about that woman hardly at all. It was a satisfying relationship. It didn't end amazingly, but it ended because it needed to. And I've been married for over 20 years to a phenomenal woman who I have a ton in common with. I don't know if soulmate, but definitely a partner in every way, not just a co-parent. We have a lot intellectually in common. We have a lot Jewishly in common. We have a lot ethically and politically in common. And I still think she's lovely. And yet I think about this woman from Australia who I knew, who I spoke to maybe 5 times, never spent more than a few hours with, and I never even kissed her. Obviously, this isn't because of her.